Welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to introduce Luba Sharira. Luba is a professor at Brandeis University, and she was a postdoc at MIT when I first met her as a grad student at MIT. And she's worked for many years with Barbara Liskov at MIT as well, and has worked on storage systems and distributed systems kinds of issues for many years. So, not on? Oh, whoops, I just wasn't holding it close enough. Sorry. Should I repeat all that? Are we okay? No, I think we're fine. Okay, anyway, I'm going to let Luba tell you what she's going to be talking about today.
Great. Thank you.
Just supposed to tell people this is actually going to be videotaped and put on Google Video, so not that anybody's likely to ask any proprietary type questions, but don't.
All right. Hi. So I'm Luba Sharira. I'm from Brandeis. And this talk is motivated by disk, which is so cheap and such plenty that it's time to rethink what we want to do with it. And the other motivation is actually my personal fascination with time and memory. So unsurprisingly, I think that what we should be doing with disk is keeping snapshots. So I will tell you a little bit about some of the technical issues that came up when we were building this snapshot system. So this is not the first time that it happens with a disk. So a little trip down the memory lane. So by 1984, when the disks become really big, it became important to actually take into account the sequential layout of the disk, because the reads really are going fast if you do it sequentially, but if you seek, that's expensive. So Berkeley File System came along with the extents and redesigned the system so you could really put out things sequentially. Then in around 91, the memories became so large that the Berkeley people again said, well, wait a second. If the memory is so big, the performance of the reads is determined by access to the cache. So reads are less important. So what remains if you are disk bound? Well, the writes remain. So how do you make writes fast? You write them in a log, sequentially again. That architecture didn't go too far because, as it turns out, because of various scalability issues, reads still remain important. No matter how much cache you put in your server, then there are those other front ends. And once you start going out of the cache into the disk and reads are inefficient, essentially your performance doesn't do very good. And because it declusters basically your data, and so reclustering back is expensive because now you have to read and put together. So that does not really work very well for large databases. Then in 1989, Elephant came along, motivated really by the plenty of disk. And this was really the first, the idea was not new. The idea came along earlier. But that was the real first system that actually allowed you to, in a file system, to say, I want to run my code as of that time. And you got the complete file system state, and you could run it as of. And so around 2005, the disk became really so cheap that we thought, well, maybe you can even keep it for a long time. And I had this idea that maybe we can finally come to the state where I can screw in the bulb of the snapshot sort of in any storage system that you come, and then you can have those snapshots. And that was sort of the motivation for this project. So chicken in every pot, and the question is, how does your pot look? But I will show you in a particular system how we did it and try to talk about what it means for others. So disk is cheap. A storage system can take those snapshots of past state, can retain for a long time. Forbes says past states are becoming increasingly important. For example, if you go to Las Vegas, you play, the casino really overnight will send you coupons and upgrade your hotel room if you lose enough. They also want to know if you win too much. So they keep track of what was happening before. What they do, they basically take the past state, they ship it to Ohio, where they have this Netezza storage system, which processes queries blindingly fast. So by the morning, they can give you coupons. So this is not a very long-term past preservation. I think healthcare increasingly trying to keep your state so you can come to, I hope you don't, but if you come to emergency room, there is some kind of information about how your prior reaction to drugs, anything interesting there. So this is information that probably should be kept per lifetime of a person. And then, just a couple months ago, Judge Posner, for the first time, wrote a ruling citing Wikipedia. So actually, that's very interesting, because Wikipedia, what the lawyers do, they basically ask the questions later, what was Judge Posner thinking? Well, guess what? It's hard to answer this question because Wikipedia actually is mutable. So it's a bit tricky. So no problem, says Lawrence Lessing. You just need to have Wikipedia as of. And in fact, already this exists. So now you want to capture not only the past, the state of the rulings and surrounding, but you want to capture the context. So the real question is, how can you capture past state and allow interesting analysis over long time? So our premise is that what you need is this back-in-time execution capability, which allows you to run read-only code, hold with the read-only. You can also do write, but just for now. Read-only code over past states, so that you can ask old questions, like, for example, what was Judge Posner thinking? But also you can ask new questions. For example, what was he not thinking? Right. So what can you do with BITE, with back-in-time execution? Well, clearly you can predict the future, because that's what we analyze past. Really? There was recently some kind of study that showed that the people, amnesiacs who lose a memory, the first thing they lose is ability to predict what's going to happen next. So you really need the past state, basically. It's only interesting to predict the future. But we allow other things. For example, we allow you to organize, maybe it's interesting to organize your past. For example, let's say when the digital camera came along, suddenly you can take lots of snapshots, lots of pictures, and retain the ones you like. But you can imagine you can take other snapshots of other things and run code automatically, selecting for some features and returning only useful ones. Maybe you can audit your past states. For example, databases, they can enforce consistency, but some transactions are bad, not because the database made a mistake, because the user typed in bad information. You may want to trace the influence of the bad information and undo the past states. So you could actually audit your memory. So what do you need to run code over past states? First, you need the snapshot to be consistent. Now, consistency is a notion which is relative to the storage system. So let's talk here about transactional consistency, because it's kind of clear what it means. But we have a way of thinking about it in other storage systems. So you need it to be consistent. Why? Because so that the same invariants hold, so that your code can run over the snapshot. We want back-in-time execution of general code, not just canned queries like temporal databases, so you can actually ask new questions, sort of phrase ad hoc new algorithms or analysis. You want to let application to choose the snapshot. This is as opposed to snapshot isolation, for example, feature, which allows you to have some snapshot in the past. Maybe you want all of them, but if you don't want all of them, then we want the application choose. And finally, we want a high resolution mechanism. So you can take as many as you like. And then later we can decide what we're going to do with that. Over time, let's look about what happens to snapshots over time. So here is one question that actually has two parts. Where is your past? So one part of this question is, where do you capture your past states? At what level? Is it logical, like temporal databases? Or is it disk level? Or is it where in the system are you capturing the past states? The other question is, where do the past states live? So most of the systems today that capture past states put the past state and the current state together. It's all happy family, and therefore the size of the database grows with the size of the past. So that's not very good if you think about high frequency past snapshots that last many years, because now suddenly, even if you had those wonderful indexing mechanisms, which are logarithmic, well, if your past is growing at that rate, that will affect your current state. The other question is, not all snapshots are of equal importance. Some maybe are not important for a long term. Today, you cannot discriminate. There is no techniques that allow you to discriminate the past states. We would like to do that. And then there is inherent tension. There is the latency of access versus compactness of representation. You may want to trade off. Today, you mostly can either compress or not. But you may want to keep different resolutions. In other words, you may want to manage your past representation. OK, so what we want is we want just right distance. We think that the right distance is to be non-disruptive. So the past should not disrupt your current state, so we can put it in every storage system. We want it to be online. We want to be able to run code in real time. We want the past to be discriminated. We want to represent different past states in a different way, allow some past states outlive the others, and we want to be adaptive. Maybe recent states are more important, so you want to access them more frequently. For example, because you want to run that analysis code that chooses which snapshots to retain long term. OK, so now you should ask, well, where is the beef, right? What is it about? So I try to motivate you that retaining past states is interesting. I hope I convinced you. So under this premise, I will show you how to be creative with your past at the cost of doing some surgery to your storage system. And I will try to convince you that it will not hurt. But it really is on the premise that you are interested in your past states. Because if you are not, then I would not go to surgery if I don't need it. So since nobody lives here, I assume that you are interested in past states. And so the question is, how do you retain the past? Now, everyone retains past incrementally. You clearly are not going to save all your state. You want to retain just the past, the parts of the state that changes. So everybody does that. It's called copy on write. And so let's assume that you have a storage system state. And now an application declares a snapshot. So basically, the system, the snapshot system, has to guarantee that this is the state when you later ask for snapshot, the system will present you with. Now, next step, the application modifies the state. So you have to somehow preserve the past state. So how do you do copy on write? So this is how everybody does. They make the following reasoning. They say, OK, so I need to keep the past. I already have that past. My current state currently is the past state. So let me leave it as it is, and let me put the new state somewhere else. So I do one write, copy on write. My past is here, right? So it was a very simple database, right? I just showed you. Just has 3 pages. And actually, just to say, and here is its page table. Right? So this is a very simple model of a storage system. Pages and page table, right, that point. So here is application declared the snapshot, and now it modifies page P. I need to save the page P. So this is the common copy on write. I take the new state, and I copy it over there. And I create a new page table. So the blue page table points to the new state, to the current state of the database. It has the same, it points to the same Q and W, but P is a new state. Where is the snapshot? The snapshot is the former page table, right? The former page table and the former state of the database is the past state. So I'm set, I'm done. Now, what happens over time? So first of all, the database and the storage system are together, right? They're together because if I modify now W, then it will migrate somewhere else, and it's all together. That means the database gets declustered over time. So I will have to recluster it. So I call this approach rent. It's very cheap in the first place, but long term, you have to pay something. Everybody does that. Postgres, Immortal, that's SQL Server's database. Net Appliance, Waffle, CVFS, X3Cow, everybody does this no override cow, except the guys who have to show TPC results. So Oracle and SQL Server, they don't do that, because that costs. Yes?
When you say the database gets clustered? You mean, you're talking about the way the storage is organized on disk?
Yes. The way the database is organized on disk, now the pages migrate, right? So if you put together, remember the Berkeley fast file system said it's important to put things together. So databases do a lot in clustering data. They put things that are read together on disk together so you can read, you read sequentially. So you lose that feature if your pages get declustered all over the database. So our approach is different. We do this approach called the split copy on write. So here again, here's my database, here's my table. And now application declares a snapshot, and after that modifies, and I'm trying to make sure I can come back to the past state. So I copy out, before I modify P in the database, in the same place where P was, before I update P in place, I copy out the pre-state of P to a different place. So I did two writes. I copied out the prior state, and I updated my current state. And I updated the page table. See, there is a page table here. Now here is my snapshot page table. If application asks for snap to run on snapshot v1, I will just use that snapshot page table and get the state. So let's say there is another snapshot declared, again, v2, and then again there's a couple of modifications. I modify again P and Q. So here are the things I copied out. Again, before I updated P and Q, I have to copy them out because snapshot v2 requires to see the state before the modifications of P and Q. And here is my new page table that points to the snapshot v2. If later, notice, I update, for example, W, I will have to go back and update those page tables, right? Because the state that they are pointing right now are pointing to the current state, but I will have to copy out that state that I'm obliged to keep. All right. So you should be asking yourself, how could it possibly, what's good about that? Because I paid this extra write. Yes?
Just a question about notation, so I can follow what's going on. The vertical boxes represent both the page table and the storage for the pages in the log?
This is storage for the pages in the log. The snapshot store, those are the pre-states of the pages that were copied out. And the page tables are also stored long-term, or should be at least conceptually stored, so that you can run the code.
Okay. Can you go back to the slide where you first copied P?
Yeah. You mean in this scheme, right?
Yes. Right
Yes.
there. Okay. So the P up top is the storage for the P that you copied.
Yes.
But there's a P that you modified. Where's the page that you modified?
In the database.
Oh, on the left side.
On the left side.
Okay.
The blue is the current state. So it doesn't change. It looks exactly the same shape as it was.
Okay.
The green is the new, is the past states. They're split.
Okay.
I keep the past separately from the current state. Okay, so first of all, as you can see, the blue state is in the same shape as it was. So this does not decluster the database. But I paid extra write. Not only that, I will have to find those pages when my snapshot code wants to run on a snapshot. So you must be thinking, well, wait a second, what's good about that? So one degree of freedom that I acquire this way, because I'm copying the past state, I have the degree of freedom to change the representation of the past in two ways. I can compress, encrypt, I can do all kinds of things. I can store round pages. It doesn't have to look like the database pages. And I can put it in a different place. I control where I write. So for example, if I want to keep my old past states in the corner of my data center, where can I power down the disk? I can do that. If I want to replicate it and put it across, I can do that. Because I'm already moving it, I can change on the fly. It doesn't cost me any more. So I will show you how I can take advantage of that, for example, to do no copy garbage collection, generational on snapshot, so I can pull out, and other things which come from that. But first, let me summarize. So by splitting the past, I get one opportunity, which is I'm not disruptive in short term, and I can do in-flight storage reorganization without paying, and I bought myself two problems. That extra write that I did, I have to show you how I can be non-disruptive, and my code needs to find those pages. So those are the two problems I have to solve. Now, before I'm showing how to solve it, I want to show you how the snapshots are used. So the snapshots have a very simple interface to the application. Basically, application says, give me a snapshot. The snapshot in this system, let's say it's a transactional system, is serialized like a transaction. The application gets back a snapshot ID. Could be number, could be data, you could call it Bobby, whatever, but something you present it back, you will get that snapshot. How you present it back? To access a snapshot, you just tell to the snapshot system, here is give me a snapshot, and it gives you the snapshot states. You run your code on the snapshot. So what do you get back? So because a snapshot is like a transaction, it's well defined what you get back. If the snapshot is serialized here, after those two transactions, it has to contain all the changes made by those two transactions, and none of the changes made later. If you declare a snapshot here, it has to show, when you ask for V2, you will see everything committed before and nothing after. So the meaning is well defined. Because we are going to allow you to discriminate, you can actually get specified discrimination policy for your snapshot. You can say this is an important snapshot, keep it for longer, or other attributes, and the system will do something for you. For simplicity, think about some ranking, long-lived, short-lived. And then if you cannot decide, make up your mind right away when you're declaring the snapshot, we allow you to do it lazily. In other words, you can lazily set, later give the snapshot ID and say, keep it for longer, or something else. OK, so the snapshot system architecture includes two components. There is this database storage, and there is snapshot store, where we put our past states. The snapshot system is integrated at the buffer manager level. It basically virtualizes the buffer manager's view of a disk. So a special copy on write captures the pre-state of page P for snapshot V the first time P is modified after snapshot V declaration. And writes that pre-state that it captured into snapshot store before it updates P on disk. So the buffer manager basically plays the following game. It captures the pre-states, and when it's time to write to the disk, it quickly creates snapshot pages and writes them in parallel to the different disks. And this invariant that I told you allows me to be recoverable from database disks. I don't need any extra recovery mechanism. The same mechanism that recovers the database will recover also the snapshots. The snapshot store interface really does virtualize the page table and the snapshot page table, database storage. So the snapshot is really just a snapshot page table and snapshot pages. So you can run the back-in-time execution code completely transparently by just mounting a snapshot page table. It looks exactly like the database. And here's how it runs. So here is your database disk with pages on disk. If you don't have the green stuff, you're just a database buffer manager. Here is your cache. Here is a page table. And page table points to pages. And if your code, normally running code, asks for page to access page P, then the buffer manager grabs the page P, looks at the page table, and brings the disk, from the disk the page. But if you are in a snapshot system, like for example, I'm here, there is an extra component, the snapshot store that has a disk. And if application asks to run back-in-time execution on snapshot V, there is a page table here mounted for the snapshot page table for that snapshot. And let's say application accesses for the first time page Q. So that's a miss. So a request for page Q comes in, and page Q has been already modified after snapshot declaration, and therefore it's in the snapshot store. So the page table entry grabs the page and sends it to the client. The client dereferences a pointer from page Q that points to page P. This is the first time the page P has been accessed, so it's a miss. So a miss to PHP comes in. It goes through the through the snapshot page table, but now PHP has not been modified since the snapshot has been declared. Therefore, the correct state is in the database. So the page table points actually to the page table of the database. And the client gets the page from the database. If sometime later PHP gets modified, before the PHP gets updated here, the pre-state will be copied out to the snapshot store. And this page table, when you next time mount it, will be updated. So it actually points to the pre-state of P, the one that corresponds to the state. Now, I made a picture of the page square, but it doesn't have to look like that. In the snapshot store, it can be represented the way you want. All it needs to do is that when it returns the page, it has to look like a page. So that gives me the way, some degree of freedom to play with. OK, so here's my first problem. How do I deal with that extra write? OK, so let's talk briefly. What does it mean to be non-disruptive? I say to be non-disruptive means, in my system, that the snapshots have to keep up with the database writes. Remember, my approach is a buy approach. I pay everything up front. So if I just can keep up, that's good enough. I will be non-disruptive, right? Because I just need to be able to create these past states, grab them underneath the storage system. Of course, I want to do it without stopping the application, because it's easy to keep up with the application if you stop it. So I have to be non-blocking. Now let's look for a moment, what does it mean for a database to perform well? Well, there is latency and there is throughput. How do you get the database to provide you good latency? You log something small to be recoverable. So my technique does not affect at all this business of logging. So I don't affect latency. I will explain in a moment just a bit more. There's other part. How does a database get good throughput? The database gets good throughput by writing lazily, right? The lazier it writes, the more times it can amortize up pages and so on. So the throughput depends on writing lazily. So my scheme, not disruptive, I have to grab the pre-states and write them to the disk without actually interfering with database ability to update it to get its throughput. If I slow down the database, that might affect the latency, right? So taking snapshots in this system is an asynchronous activity. So I have to make sure the database can propagate updates at the rate that it needs to propagate. So I characterize the non-disruptiveness with this metric called, imagine, database, you pour transactions in, and the database buffer manager writes them. So there is pour and drain. So the propagation rate is determined by rate of drain divided by rate of pour. As long as you can drain faster than you pour, you're non-disruptive. So my scheme has to preserve that. So let's look at the game. The key issue, I will not go precisely the techniques. There is a paper that describes. But basically, the key issue here is repeated modifications. Why is that? When you have repeated modifications to the same page, the database is very happy about it because it doesn't have to write it. The database just waits. It absorbs in the buffer. The better the database is off, the worse I am off the snapshot system because I have to write. A frequent snapshot system has to write it all. So why do I have any hope? Because I write sequentially those snapshot pages, while the database basically does random I/O. So there is some hope here. The other problem is that the repeated modifications may overwrite in the buffer cache the pages, the snapshot states that I need to preserve. So many systems, what they do, they block. After the snapshot is declared, they block the system and say, wait a second. I'm going to write out my snapshots. I don't want to do that. So the way I deal with that, again, I will just be waving hands. I basically keep in memory enough pre-states of the pages that I owe for the snapshots so that when the buffer manager is about to write a page, I create the required snapshot pages and write them concurrently to a different disk. What do I pay? I need extra memory to hold the pre-states. In a system which has, like database, which modifies small parts, I don't need a lot of memory. In a system that overwrites completely pages, I will need to keep more memory. So that will create. So we analyzed and we showed that actually highest frequency snapshots with some extra memory allow you to be non-disruptive. So you can do that. If you're interested in the details, then there is a ACD paper and you can look it up. And what I show you here actually is how the buffer manager how the buffer looks. The buffer now has, the blue is its normal buffer manager state, and the green are those immutable states, pre-states that I grabbed, that I'm using to create the snapshot pages before writing database updates disk on state on disk. Okay, so now my other question other problem that I created was how do I find the snapshot pages? So notice this problem does not exist in the no override system. It doesn't exist because no override system it froze the page table and it froze the database, so it doesn't have to do anything. It has already the indexing, but I need to figure out how I'm going to give back those page tables. And notice those page tables, they change over time, right? Anytime, for example, the blue means it's still in the database, the page for that snapshot. But if it will be updated, I will come back and modify it. Page tables can be huge. Going back and maintaining large page tables would be very expensive. Clearly, you don't want to do that. Now, let's just think for a moment, how can you get the snapshot back? So here is one approach you could do. Let me just go for a second backwards. I could, for example, roll back. I don't want to do that, but I could roll back the state here and apply to the database those pages up to the place where my snapshot starts. I could get back the correct state, but that's disruptive for a long history, right? And I will also have to apply a very long rollback. That's essentially like recovery. I could also go from the place where my snapshot starts and go forward. So if, for example, I need page P for snapshot V sometime later, I can start from the place where the snapshot started and look for the first occurrence of P. That's the P I want, right? And then if my code asks for page Q, I can go forward and look for the first occurrence of page Q, because that's the first time Q got modified and copied, and that corresponds to the Q that corresponds to that snapshot. Does that make sense? But even that is not very good, because I have to scan over those. I'm really doing recovery over big, chunky pages. I don't want to scan them. So instead, what I do, I keep pointers to the snapshot pages. So now my pages are, see, P was the page, the red page, that was copied after snapshot V was declared. The next P was the one that was copied after snapshot V2 was declared, and so on. And I keep pointers there to those pages. So I have this log of mappings. Think about a little page table with just mappings for individual entries, which say page P, address in the snapshot so-and-so, page P. And I scan that mapping log instead of the pages. So mappings are smaller, and therefore my scans go faster. So this is my indexing method, right? It's predicated for copy on write snapshots. There is this notion, first encountered mapping. That's the first mapping that I was found. That's what I'm looking for. So what I need to do to run that, I just need to remember where was the first time I copied. And notice, I have to write the mappings in the correct order. The order invariant is that the mappings retained for snapshot V have to come before mappings for snapshot V plus 1. So this way, when I scan, I will find the right mapping. But notice, I don't have to control the order in which the pages are written. I just have to make sure that the mappings are in the correct order. That's actually very important for third-party implementations, because I can track the buffer manager as opposed to manipulating how it writes and the mappings are small, I can reorder them in memory. So the lookup is then scan the map log, what is what my log is called, and collect those first encountered mappings. Now this is great, better than scanning pages. So let's think about performance of this scheme. So if the database is updated uniformly, in other words, you have n pages and the uniform probability of updating any page, then after approximately n log n updates, this is a standard coupon collection problem, you have overwritten all the pages of the database. So after n log n updates, you will have the entire database copied out into the snapshot log, and therefore the mappings, right? So here is the database will be up there in the page log. The mappings will be here. And so when you start scanning, looking for pages of snapshot v1, after n log n mappings, you will find all the mappings for your snapshot. So n log n. The problem is database updates are actually not uniform. Database updates are skewed. Some pages are very cold. It's actually well known. Log structured file system cleaner algorithms have seen that. Some pages are very rarely modified, once in a blue moon. And yet, that doesn't mean they're not accessed frequently. So you have the problem, I have the problem, that even though writing those mappings is very cheap, but scanning to find a mapping for a cold page may have to pass over many hot mappings, which will occur all the time, because the workloads really have some things are very hot and some are cold, and my scans are very long. So we have this super simple approach, like a charm, very simple. The idea is the problem scanning here is long is because you have many duplicates. So instead, we create another layer which drops the duplicates. So what I do, it's like a fast lane. I start scanning here, and then I go over to that fast lane, and I have the invariant which says, if I do that, scanning here, the first encountered mappings that I will find when I start scanning for V here are exactly the same first encountered mappings I will find when I scan in the fast lane. Right? So how do I do that? So for example, here I had, this is the mappings that were copied after V was declared. So there is P4, P5, again P4, because V2 was declared, then P5. So in the upper area, I copy P4 the first time, P5. I don't copy that, because when I copy from here, I don't need that. So I don't need here. And then when I finished, if I start here, I scan here. Up to here, I have no choice. But from there on, I go up and scan the fast lane. And there will be exactly the same. See, there will be no P1. P1 will go only once. P1, this one will not go. P2 will be there. This P1 will not. So I essentially collapse the duplicates over a chunk. Right? I eliminate duplicates across a chunk. What does this chunk corresponds to? It corresponds to basically the I/O unit that you want to read from the disk and keep in memory. And while in memory I'm collecting those mappings, I am also collecting those mappings at the same time. And the more skewed is the workload, the better this scheme works, because it just doesn't keep the repeated modification. So we analyzed it, and we implemented it, and it really works really well. You just need a couple layers, and you are done. So this is the first index for copy and write snapshots that actually is both write optimized, because writing those extra sequential logs is very, they're cheap. And it's also read optimized. You can scan. And what it does, it essentially brings down the cost of scanning a snapshot, a long-lived snapshot in a skewed workload, to the cost of scanning a short-lived snapshot uniform. So that's the best I can do. So it's disk I/O optimal for both writes and lookup. It allows to run code in real time over multi-year snapshots. And its performance matches the fastest temporal indexes like TSB and Snapshot in terms of lookup. But we are cheaper in terms of writing, because we write sequentially, and indexes, you have to update them so they're actually random. So we're very happy with that. Now, I have, what, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Like that? Okay. So I will tell you one more story. So I told you about how to overcome that problem of extra write. I told you how to find the snapshots. Now I want to tell you how do I take advantage of this new freedom that I got, which is reorganizing. So discriminated snapshot storage. So, all right. Let me remind, disk is cheap. You can keep it over time. However, it's not, even though disk is cheap, but babysitting the disk in a data center actually costs you energy bills. So if you need the state, you want to keep it. But if you don't need it, really, you may want to get rid of it. Or maybe you want to put it in a place where you can power down the disk. Today, you cannot discriminate in those past states because basically you have this copy on write status all together. You also may want to keep some snapshots with better access than with other. Today, you cannot adapt. So we're proposing this new feature called discrimination. It has two parts. There is a policy and a mechanism. The application specifies the discrimination policy. So it can say, this snapshot is more important, which means it will stay for longer. And it can do it either eagerly, right away when it creates a snapshot, or lazy, later. The system provides a discrimination mechanism that retains the important snapshots for longer or stores them with faster access. So let's just review how the snapshots are created. Okay, so there is no useful notion is the span of the snapshot, which is really the transactions between that snapshot and the next snapshot. And pages retained for a snapshot are the pre-states of the pages that get updated in the span. So let me give you an example. That will be simple. So let's say I have a snapshot v4. I declared it. And now here are transactions that commit modifications to pages P, S, and P again. And here is a new snapshot, v5. So I say the span of snapshot v4 is this transaction sequence. And the pages retained for snapshot v4 are P, the pre-state of P, and the pre-state of S. But not the pre-state of this P. I don't need it, right? Because I already retained the pre-state that corresponds to snapshot v4, and so on, right? So this is the two notions I need to explain. Okay, so if you look in the snapshot store, right, if the snapshot starts here, the pages retained for the snapshot 4 are the red ones. This is the mappings. And the yellow ones are the pages retained for snapshot v5. Now, what happens if I want to do garbage collection? So if I do, the policy is aging, meaning I want to chop off the tail. So all snapshots go away first. Then in this system, there is no problem, because I want to basically discard pages retained for v4 before pages retained for v5. I just chop off the red one, and I forget about it. That's really easy. But what if the application actually told me that it wants to retain v4? v4 is the important one, and v5 is not. Then I have to retain the P up there, the red one P. I have to retain S. I don't need the yellow P up there, because that belongs to the v5, and I already have my P. What about Q? I need the Q, because Q, right, is that the first occurrence of Q that I will need when I scan? So if I discard the P, I get a hole, so I get the fragmentation, right? Now, normal snapshots, the no override snapshots, you get fragmentation if you try to pull out a snapshot in the middle either way, so you cannot do anything about that. Yes?
With regard to when your discrimination policy says, I'd like to really compress in exchange for slower access time, you might want to compress the later P as a delta from the earlier P.
That's true.
In which case, this picture gets more complicated.
That's true. I'm showing you just garbage collection. In other words, there will be a different policy and I have to apply different mechanism. This is just a mechanism for doing garbage collection, right? Ignoring the speed of representation.
Well, and assuming that each snapshot of the page is representation independent from every other snapshot.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, good point. Fragmentation is not good. Fragmentation is not good because you get, over time, non-sequential page writes. And then you get, in order to recluster it back, you need to read and write, and that's expensive, and it's hard to be non-disruptive if you need to do essentially cleaning, copy out. So we don't want to do that. So here is an approach to do garbage collection, no fragmentation and without copying, right? So the rank, the application gives you the rank of a snapshot when it declares. The rank determines the snapshot lifetime. What I do is I put, when I copy out, I put the long-lived and the short-lived snapshots in different places. Now, as you have seen, some pages belong to two snapshots, both long and short. So I put the joint pages with the long-lived guys. And I also create an index for every separate snapshot rank. And I make sure, because the snapshots, the shared pages go with the longer lived, that the pointers, the index pointers, only point from short-lived areas into long-lived areas, and never point from long-lived into short-lived. And then, when I collect in each area, I do aging. So I just take it out and throw it out eventually. No fragmentation whatsoever, and I haven't copied. I didn't touch the disk. So that allows you to do essentially generational garbage collection for your snapshots without touching disk, just by doing the right kind of copying. So this looks like this. So here is snapshots, right? V4, the guy we talked before about, is the important guy. So it was declared to be the long-lived. But V5 and V6 and other guys, they're short-lived. Here is my short-lived area. Up there is long-lived area. And here are the indexes for short-lived and for long-lived. And indexes point to the pages there. So when page P gets modified after V5 for the first time, the page P is both a page that belongs to V5 snapshot and V4, but because this is the first time it's modified after V4, it's shared page, I have to put it in the long-lived area. So here it's up there. But notice it's being pointed from both short-lived and long-lived. Q here is modified for the first time after V6. So it belongs to V6 and actually all the other previous guys. Again, it's a shared one. It goes up there. And it's pointed from both. This P, though, is modified after V6, but it's not, it only belongs to V6. It's not doesn't belong to either V5 to V5, so it stays here. And it's only pointed from the short-lived. So when I get sick of the short-lived snapshots, I just yank the short-lived area with its index, and I stay with the, yes?
Originally, you were saying that the assigning the importance of a snapshot could be delayed.
Very good question.
Just with the limit on how much you can delay it.
Exactly. So there's this other approach called lazy discrimination, which is what you say. Maybe I use code. So what I do, when I do it lazily, I necessarily have to copy, because I didn't know in advance where to put it. So the game I play, I change the representation, so my copying is cheap. Right? So the game I play, I basically represent my snapshots now in a way that we were sort of alluding. I make them look like a database log a little bit. Checkpoints and diffs. So by just keeping snapshots as diffs, they become very compact. If modifications are small, which often are. So then when I need to copy them, it's cheap for me to copy just the diffs, as opposed to copying the entire pages. But of course, reconstructing, accessing snapshots based on diffs takes a long time. So I insert, like a database, checkpoints. The checkpoints are just page-based snapshots, the regular guys. So look what's interesting. So the back-in-time execution is very simple, right? You basically put up your checkpoint, and then you roll forward with the diffs. That's how you get to run. But here is how it looks. The lazy discrimination, what it does, it copies the diffs. So, okay, so I declare the snapshots, and then later you come to me and you say, that snapshot I declared there actually is important. I want to keep it for longer. So I have to get rid of the other guys. So what I do, I will copy out the diffs, but the checkpoints, the system controls them. So the system can decide whether determine their rank. And because it can determine their rank, I can garbage collect them without copying in the old way, by just writing them in the right place. So let me show you how it looks. So here is the representation. Here is a checkpoint, and here are the diffs corresponding to that checkpoint. Then there is another checkpoint. You see, those are just snapshots, right? But those are page-based snapshots. I keep them in different places. And here are the diffs corresponding to this checkpoint. So if you want to run a back-in-time execution here, you just need to mount this snapshot and then apply the diffs. Right? So if application later tells me how to discriminate the snapshots, I have to copy out the diffs that I need up. But the checkpoints, I decide when I create them, I calculate whether they are long-lived or short-lived. So what happens, I put the long-lived pages here as I create the checkpoints. Because a checkpoint is just a long-lived page-based snapshot that I showed you how to garbage collect it without touching. So when time comes to get rid, if I need to squeeze out those two checkpoints, because basically I just need that one and those diffs, this row just goes away the same way, and I am staying with this one. Because I could, right? Because the system creates the checkpoint, so it can copy out. So there is more. I have to stop now because it's getting close. I can also, this is slow, so I can make it faster. In other words, let me just go forward to the conclusion, because
What does BITE stand for?
back-in-time execution. All right, so we have the system running, the Snap, the non-disruptive system runs on Thor. Some people here are familiar with Thor. Sanjay had some work in that. There is Thresher, our garbage collector runs. We have a paper in Usenix, describes all those garbage collection schemes. Our newest index, the old system used a kind of slow index, but the new one index I just showed you, we have it implemented in Snap, and now in BDB, it's in review. And the performance looks really good. The questions are very simple for performance. How fast is your back-in-time execution? How much does it cost you to garbage collect? And how non-disruptive are you? In other words, can you really go forward without paying? So let me just summarize. I don't really have time to show you, because the metrics are as I explained. They talk about rank, about non-disruptiveness as being the ratio of pouring and draining. And the way I measure the draining is how long it takes for me to clean one page in the database. So I measure it in the system that has no snapshots, in a system that has snapshots. And I see how long does it take me. So that's my slowdown for the drain of pour. I control some parameters, which is really the overwriting and density, as I explained. And I check it for busy database and database that works really low load, because the interesting question is what happens if you have lots of time. It's easy to be non-disruptive, but what happens when you are busy? So here is the only thing I want you to tell you about the busy part. What's interesting about this scheme? When the database becomes really busy, and I want just to show you the picture, what happens? How does database becomes busy? There is more clients, more transactions submitted. What happens in a database when the load grows? You get misses in the cache. The database starts reading from disk. When the database starts reading from disk, it actually slows down, because it pays, it now, in order to produce an update, it has to go to the disk to read. This is a really great news for the snapshot system because now the database pays more to produce that update. So me, the snapshot system, I don't pay more. I have more time to shovel them to the disk. So this is what you see here. When I run it with 1 client and 4 clients, this metric I had, non-disruptiveness, drops. But when I get to 8 clients and my system runs at full capacity, suddenly I do better. So that's actually good news. In other words, I do better when the other guy does worse. That's all. So I showed you, basically the higher order bit is split copy and write snapshots of past states that run code in real time, retained at disk block level with garbage collection are cheaper than you might have been thinking. And the take home is really new snapshot techniques, keep your past current state non-disruptive, discriminate past. I showed you in the storage system techniques in a transactional. We have some ideas how to do it in a file system. I want to talk to those people that I talked today from UCLA. Yes. How do you do it in a file system? It seems like there is a good chance with your mechanisms to do it. And the question is, what happens in your storage system, right? We can do it in a BDB, but what about if you're interested in past? That's it. Any questions? Yes.
How does this relate to systems that have a single persistent virtual memory over the whole system, like the Kikos and Eros operating systems?
Yeah.
To make those multiple versions?
Absolutely, because you know what is a virtual memory? It's a table and pages. So all you need to do is to keep that Skippy index that I have, right? That allows you to that model captures exactly, so you can do that.
Maybe we should take any other questions up. It looks like there might be somebody else trying to comment.
All right.